this journey for you started in a younger time in your own life after a loss. Could you share a little bit about that?
Well, sure. I mean, as you said, my personal experience with grief and loss really began when I was a teenager. And so I got to experience firsthand how family dynamics change, all of the secondary losses that occur following the loss of someone that we love, and the changes and transitions that families go through. So when I started in graduate school, I knew that that was something I wanted to study and explore further, is how to help parents and children and teens understand more clearly what to expect through the grief process, and educate and support people in how to manage that.
What was the biggest challenge for you? You lost your dad, and you were very close to your dad. I think that's one of the reasons we connected. I was so close to my daughter, and you were very close to your dad. What were some of the biggest challenges for you in the time after your dad passed?
Well, for me, I was in college at the time, and so when my dad passed, it was a very isolating experience. I was away from home. I didn't have my natural support system there for me. So for me, it was a very isolating and lonely experience. And in talking with people who've gone through a similar type of loss, I hear that same sentiment over and over again. Because even though grief is a universal experience, it's oftentimes experienced as being very lonely. And perhaps the reason for that is people around us just aren't really sure how to help us or how to support us. Maybe people are afraid, am I going to say the wrong thing? Or maybe if I get too close to you, something so tragic or so awful could happen to me too. So there's a lot of reasons that contribute to why our social support system changes.
What is for kids, for teenagers, is that true? Is that even more true in their social world? They're so vulnerable, and yet it's so important for them to be included. How do you go through that as a teenager? You're grieving, you've suffered this loss. What are some of the challenges to kids that are going through this?
Adolescence and young adulthood is characterized by a heightened sense of self-awareness. And we are very self-conscious at that age about how others are perceiving us. We really want to be fitting in and making sure that, you know, we are wearing the right thing and saying the right thing.
How do I stay cool when my brother or sister died,
exactly.
Or my dad or mom just died, or my grandparents, or how do I stay cool?
Right, yeah. And so that is exactly one of the reasons why teenagers don't feel as comfortable talking with their friends or opening up in a way that would be helpful to people around them, because grief sets them apart from their normal cohort.
What would they see? What side do they reveal to you behind the private doors of counseling and in the support groups that you run? What do they reveal? What would their friends see? They would see what?
Yeah, a lot of sorrow, Ken, of course. Longing, sadness.
They're so sad.
Oh, absolutely. And on top of that sadness, I think that makes this process so much more complicated for teens is that the confusion is associated with it as well. When we're young adults, when we're adolescents, it's a very tumultuous time in our lives. We're trying to understand ourselves more clearly, redefine our own values and belief systems, maybe even if they're a little bit different than our parents. We are understanding more about our world and exploring our newfound independence. And so in addition to all of these new developmental stages and exciting and new times in our lives,
now we have this.
Now we're grieving. Exactly.
Now we have this. This just messes it all up. This throws a whole nother curve in the process. So how do kids try to cope? How do they try to cope?
Well, at this age, teens are at more risk for maladaptive coping strategies. They are more vulnerable to things like self-injurious behavior, risk-taking activities. Maybe even they're experimenting with drugs and alcohol, getting involved in wrong crowds or with members of the opposite sex in a way that is a little bit more advanced than their age, what would be appropriate for their age. So at this time, it becomes even more critical that we are physically and emotionally present for our teenagers.
And parents I know watching that are saying, all right, I want to break that down because that's what I want to do. I really want to be there. As a matter of fact, even though I'm dying myself, I really want to be there for my son or my daughter, and I know they're going through hell.
And they're asking how.
How do I do that?
Right.
What do I,
Yeah.
besides, obviously bringing in other support. It takes a whole village, including good counselors, including support groups for kids. So the first thing might be, you're not alone. This isn't completely on you.
Yes.
But secondly, how do we coach parents? What do we say to parents who are so worried? It's like, oh my God, are we doing enough? Is he or she hurting and they're not telling us? Am I being a good parent? What should I be doing? What do you say to those parents?
Well, first of all, I would tell parents that just because their teen isn't talking directly about the loss doesn't mean that they're still not grieving or still not in need of their support. Oftentimes, young adults or teens express their grief in nonverbal ways. So we might see their expression come out in ways such as journaling or artwork or listening to music, or even maybe how they're physically presenting themselves. Teens dress a certain way in order to express who they are. So these are ways that oftentimes teens express their grief response. And just because they're not talking about it doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't struggling with some of the very similar emotions and thoughts that parents are. Teens will erupt into an emotion and then be seemingly okay, able to relate to their friends or go to the movies or hang out in their room and listen to music.
I want to go back to that friends thing. A lot of parents come to us and say they're with their friends all the time. They're not around anymore. They're with their friends. We're here dying. We're worrying about them all the time. Where are they?
When teens are grieving, oftentimes they do start spending more time out of the home with friends. And I would encourage parents to at least consider the possibility that that type of behavior is more likely due to teens needing a much-needed break and teens relating to
They're taking
their
a break
peers.
from us.
Sure,
And they're normalizing their life by being with their buddies.
Exactly. And because teens grieve more intermittently, it's sort of like touching a hot stove. If you were to touch a hot stove and it's too hot, you need to take your hand away very quickly. Well, that might be something that's happening for a teen that's spending a lot of time outside of the home. When they're in the home and they're with their family, they might be reminded of the loss, and it might be almost too painful. At this age, teens are still developing coping strategies and understanding themselves in a way so that they can feel more confident to manage these difficult situations.
Is this an important moment for us as a parent to really help our child learn how to cope? Since none of us know how to cope with a loss of this magnitude, is it also a critically important time where we can help our child cope with not only with this, but for the future, for any other losses they might cope?
Because teens aren't directly expressing their grief in a way that we might expect from another adult, parents can really benefit from just physically being present with their teen, being involved in their lives, asking questions, inviting them to share what it is that's going on for them, understanding their world as best they can. By just being physically present for your teen, you'll be modeling how to help them cope. There's a fine line between distraction and self-soothing behaviors. So sometimes teens might need to remove themselves from the home and relate to their peers in a quote-unquote normal way. But there are also times to remember the person who died, perhaps memorialize them, make ways to continue that relationship with the person who died.
Should I tell my daughter, we're all going to the cemetery and you're coming too? We're going to go honor and memorialize your sister, or should I extend that as an invitation?
Oh, and the way you just said that, extending it as an invitation, sounded so much more warm and inviting and safe.
And then what if she says no all the time? It's like, Dad, I don't want to go there. Should I respect that?
Sometimes just knowing that that outlet is available is intervention enough. Sometimes it's just nice for a teen to know that they can go there when and if they're ready.
You know what? One of the most things I'm most proud of myself as a parent of a surviving child is the scar tissue on my tongue.
Biting
all
your
the
tongue.
times that I've bitten it, it's
Sure.
like, all right, shut
Sure.
up.
Yeah.
She doesn't need your advice. She needs you to just listen and be there.
Mm.
Is that, am I doing the right thing there?
It sounds beautiful, Ken. Yeah, it sounds like you're really available for your daughter in a way that she needs, in a way that's going to be most meaningful to her. Because we can provide information, we can share our wisdom, but unless our teens are really ready to hear it, it is not as helpful.
And do I have a right, because I'm so heartsick and I've just gone through a loss and I'm more worried than I usually am. I'm waiting for the next crisis or the shoe to drop, or and I'm so over concerned about my surviving child. Do I have a right to say, I need you to call me when you get to your friend's house? Or am I just being ridiculous and instilling fear in them?
Well, it's a fine line, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, because I can appreciate that parents do need that sense of safety for their own coping. I tell parents that rules and guidelines that they set for their teen still need to exist even in a grief response. However, here's the difference. The implementation of those rules and that discipline looks a lot more gentle and soft and warm. If a teen comes in after curfew or doesn't call, if that's the rule, then absolutely consequences need to follow. We need to be setting the discipline and drawing the line as appropriate, because we do need to be concerned with some of those maladaptive coping strategies that we discussed earlier.
What are some of the, if I'm a parent sitting out there saying, I'm going crazy, I don't know if I don't trust myself anymore. Am I being an overreactive, crazy parent who's running around with their hair on fire? Or is there something here that I need to pay attention to and maybe even get some help for my kid with? What are some of the warning signs that I should be alert to that are just cause for me to really take next steps, maybe consult with a professional or do something?
Right. Some of the things that parents can look out for in terms of warning signs that their child might benefit from additional support are if they are feeling chronically depressed, to the point maybe where they don't have the energy to be doing the things that they would normally find enjoyable. And it's completely natural for teens not to find as much pleasure in the activities that they once enjoyed, but if they are isolating themselves or avoiding those types of activities, at that point I would think it would be very helpful.
If this becomes a pattern, if this is like, this is going on a long time.
We also want to be aware of how our teens are performing either in their jobs or at school. Increased absenteeism is something that parents should be aware of if kids are just not showing up to school or leaving school early. I would also be aware of any significant changes, maybe if our teens are spending a whole bunch of new time with new people in our lives, or maybe if teens are suddenly not participating in meals, or maybe if they're going to bed later and later or waking up at very early hours of the morning. Those are some things that we want to be aware of.
What are some things I shouldn't worry about as a parent that they might be doing because they're grieving? They do have such heavy hearts. They are so sad because they love their brother or sister or mom or dad. What are some things I shouldn't be worried about?
Well, a lot of times parents come to me concerned about their child's anger or frustration. And I think it's very common for teens to express their grief in a way that is displaced from the content of the grief. I'll give you a good example. You know, sometimes teens will completely erupt when they're not able to go to a friend's house on a school night, let's say. Or let's say, you know, the dinner wasn't exactly what it was that they were hoping for that night. Or the movie was sold out and they had to go see another one. Teens might have an exaggerated response to that and act out in a very frustrated or angry way. I would encourage parents to consider that in part that reaction might be due to grief and less due to their teen going down a path that might be aggressive or conduct as problems and
so
things
saying
like that.
to your kid at that point, I'm so sorry.
Or
what do we say at that point instead of getting into the fray with them and what do you mean or why are you reacting so, you know, instead of jumping into the fire with them, what's a calming thing? How do we neutralize that? How do we speak to the part of them that might be hurting so bad at that particular moment?
Parents can benefit from being what I call a mirror with heart.
I like that.
Making an observation about what they see in a very warm and empathetic and caring way.
So if you're a parent who's sitting there saying, oh, I haven't done my homework, I don't have those rules down, now might be a good time to be proactive and sit down with your partner or whoever is significant in your child's life and really say proactively, what are the rules and guidelines that we need to live by to take care of our family in this difficult time?
Right.
The other thing is, do we also have a right to go to, and is it important to go to the school and to be able to help them to find out what their rules and guidelines are, because they may or may not be aware of what's happened in our family.
I understand. Well, as adults, we get time off of work when we experience a loss. Other adults are able to understand perhaps a little bit, in part, what it is that we're going
We go through bereavement leave and we have all that.
And when we come back to work, a lot of times people, at least if it's a compassionate workplace, find that coworkers or supervisors are understanding and help us ease back into work. However, for teenagers, they have to go right back into the classroom, and those test dates, those SATs, those college applications can't wait. Those are hard deadlines. So I absolutely encourage teens, and ideally we would want that to be coming from the teen, but as parents, if we can help support teens in this process, that would be a good idea as well.
We can become their advocates in grief.
Sure, absolutely. But talking to administration, talking to teachers, helping them understand a little bit about what the grief response could look like for teens, what to expect, and how they can help, whether that be a little bit of an extension on a homework assignment, or maybe even one-on-one attention after school or during the classroom if a teacher is able to touch bases with a teenager.
What would your wish be for them?
My wish for parents watching this is to give yourself permission to be who you are in the presence of your teenager. Teenagers relate best to people who are genuine with them, who are honest with them, and can respond to them in a very compassionate, caring way.
And will they be forgiving? They see their parents are compromised. They see their parents are heartsick. Are their kids going to be okay with that? Are their kids, in other words, is there room for them to be in this compromised state for a while and to heal?
Oftentimes when teens realize that their parents are human too, this is what I see.
Yeah, it's a
relief.
relief
I see a great big relief.
Yeah. It's like I can be human too.
Sure, that gives them permission to grieve as well.
Yeah. And then the whole family, it's like our family has permission to heal, to take this time that we know is going to be difficult, to be patient with each other, to love each other, to grieve together, to tell the stories together, and to heal together. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate it, and as well as all the work that you continue to do to help our families.
Thank you.